I'm Michael James. I'm the host of this Live from the Heartland show, available on youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos every week on Apple and Spotify podcasts, etc. And one of the highlights from our show for the week of February 28th was our interview with the board chairman of Indivisible Chicago Alliance, the one and only Kathy Tholin. And we talk about Indivisible, how it came into being, what they're doing, and what people can do. Hope you enjoy the Heartland Highlight with Kathy Tholin of Indivisible.
Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit.
Okay, all you citizens of the world, it's back to Live from the Heartland for the second segment of our show for the week of February 28th. And I am really honored to have as our next guest someone from Indivisible, actually the board chair of Indivisible, Kathy Tholin. And I went to my first Indivisible demonstration a week or two back over at the Federal Building, and was pretty impressed with the various vibe of the place, the number of people, a lot of senior types from earlier organizations, plenty of young people. It was pretty wonderful, and I thought it would be time to bring Indivisible on. I do have a close friend, Wendy Kramer-Posner, who Kathy knows, and she was the first person I knew who was active in Indivisible and is a longtime old friend. So I went to the website and I saw Indivisible is all about remaking our democracy. Indivisible is a movement of thousands of group leaders, millions of members, taking the initiative, increasingly complex actions to resist the GOP's agenda, electing local champions, and fighting for progressive policy. So that's right up my alley. It's right up the Live from the Heartland alley. And with all that said, hello to you, Kathy. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you were with the Center for Neighborhood Technology. I'm sure you've been involved with lots of other things. Your name is very familiar. Katie Hogan, our producer, talks very highly of you. Fill us in about yourself a bit.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I spent my working career in nonprofit community development work in Chicago in a number of different places. Have always had a commitment to this place, Chicago. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, as an adult at least, and have always been working in issues and ways that address inequities in our city, that create development opportunities that benefit low and moderate income people and communities, that are environmentally beneficial, and in fact, at the intersection of those things. I have been out of the work world for a little while, and have been in recent years engaged in a different kind of actions, starting, I guess, in about 2017 after the presidential election, when it became clear that a different kind of work was necessary. And so I've been involved with a number of folks, but largely with Indivisible Chicago in both resisting, as you were speaking of, resisting the things that the ways that the Trump agenda was working to destroy our freedom and our well-being and our security, and also working hard to elect other elected officials who would carry on a progressive agenda. And I'd love to talk a bit about that while we're talking today, those electoral issues. And then, so I have, during the last 4 years, been very involved in those elections. Now, obviously very involved in with Indivisible Chicago on as we work to resist even greater threats than we have had in the past.
Well, we'll go to those elections in a minute. I'm going to ask one more thing. I'm just a curious kind of guy when it comes to progressive organizations. And how did Indivisible come into existence here in Chicago? Who are the people maybe who are involved, and how did you get involved with it?
Sure. And I wasn't there on day one,
That's
but
what I was after.
I came in a little later. But pretty much as soon as after the presidential election of 2016, Indivisible itself nationally was launched because a group of folks who used to work in congressional offices wrote a paper about how to resist this agenda and what lessons we might take from the ways that the right had organized to punch above its weight during other previous times. And that paper took off like wildfire, and people all around the country started organizing little groups of people. Here in Chicago, several folks led by Jason Rieger, who was we credit as being the founder of Indivisible Chicago, decided to hold a meeting to see if anyone would show up to talk about organizing. Thought they'd get, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people, and hundreds of people walked in the door. Clearly, there was a huge interest and appetite for figuring out what to do next and resisting what was going on. Out of that, Indivisible Chicago was born. And today, just to say a little more about that, today there are the long name is the Indivisible Chicago Alliance, which is made up of both individual members from across Chicago and surrounding suburbs, but also individual neighborhood chapters, community chapters, both in Chicago and in suburban areas. So we have there are chapters of Indivisible that do work that gather in communities locally, in Evanston, in downtown Chicago, in Lincoln Square, in Lakeview, on the Northwest Side, and various other locations around Chicago.
Well, I get a daily email telling me what's going on and who I should call and where there's a demonstration. You mentioned this initial paper when Indivisible was founded, and it just triggered this thing, and maybe you're already starting it, but would that be comparable to the Republicans' evil paper to 25 or whatever it's called? I'm wondering if we really have a plan for when we take power again, for what kind of things we might initiate.
It wasn't that kind of paper. We need the blueprint, right? There are pieces of that blueprint around, but that's not how, we don't have the Project 20, whatever it's going to be year, in quite the same way as they did. But, and this was a blueprint for resistance.
All right.
That was done in 2017, because that's what was called for at that moment.
I get it. And I think part of the resistance is electoral politics and electing real good politicians or leaders or whatever we want to call them, representatives. Fill us in on the work that you do and that Indivisible does on that front.
Sure. So here's the first thing to know. Here in Chicago, we enjoy an advantage that almost no progressive folks have anywhere in the country, which is we are within driving distance of two absolutely critical swing states. So Indivisible, since the run-up to the 2018 elections and going forth from there, has dedicated itself to organizing, sometimes in Illinois, when there are critical, and there are some critical elections that happen here, and we've been involved in them, but largely organizing people to both go to, canvass in, and call into our neighboring states of Wisconsin and Michigan. And that work has grown. It's always been pretty substantial, and it has grown with each election. And I would say in this last round, we had easily upwards of 1,500 individual people who got involved in the Wisconsin and Michigan elections. Some of them were out knocking on doors every Saturday. Some of them were out knocking on doors every Saturday and Sunday. Some of them were coming, when they could. But we had, even though the presidential race in both those states was not won, there were some really important victories that are key to holding on to some power that we really need. So.
Well, we had an election up there in Wisconsin for a Supreme Court justice, and we the voters shifted the composition of the Supreme Court in Wisconsin to positive, progressive, and that is before us again. There's another Supreme Court seat that's coming up. There's an election. It will determine a lot of decisions made in that state. You want to fill us in on that particular election? Because I know back during the last election, we were up there for Operation, I wasn't, but many people I know were up there for Operation Swing State. And I love the concept. I think it'll get refined. How do you interpret what people tell you or don't tell you? But tell us a little bit about this Supreme Court race in Wisconsin and why it's so crucial.
Right. So this goes on the list of everybody who's out there saying, like, what can I do? What can I do right now? This goes close to the top should go close to the top of everybody's list. As you said, Michael, we won an election for a Supreme Court that was absolutely critical, not just to Wisconsin, but to the country as a whole. When we got the 4-3 majority, the Wisconsin Supreme Court reversed the gerrymandered maps that were keeping Wisconsin, way outsized Republican legislature for the population overall. Some strides were made in this last election to get more Democratic representation in the legislature, and they're on track because not everyone's elected every 2 years, right? They're on track to make even more strides next time and possibly recapture the legislature or portions of the legislature. So the gerrymandered maps, we didn't have, we weren't at risk of challenging election results. There were all kinds of things that the Wisconsin Supreme Court was now protecting against abuses of power and anti-democratic, with a small d, actions, right? So we're now in a place where another judge is retiring, leaving an open seat. There are two candidates. The progressive candidate, Susan Crawford, is a judge, Judge Susan Crawford. And her opponent was the Attorney General under Scott Walker. Remember Scott Walker?
Oh yeah,
He's the guy who shut everything down in Wisconsin, and he's being bankrolled by. Yes.
I would imagine it's some kind of, I don't like to say his name, but the Muskie guy.
No. Yeah, that guy. He's being bankrolled by that guy. And it's a absolutely crucial election. We lose it and we go back to the 3-4. We win it. We maintain the 4-3. And this is going to be important for all elections nationally going forward, right? And is one of the first opportunities to demonstrate people aren't going with the Musk agenda, right? The Musk-Trump agenda. This is the first opportunities for a loss of the current regime. So it's absolutely critical. And I just want to say, Janet Protasewicz, she beat her opponent by, I wish I could quote it.
Good amount.
Way more than any of the other elections, like these close elections. It was the least close election in Wisconsin, something like this, for a very long time. And the reason is that this is an April 1st election, right? Not so many people vote. So this is an eminently winnable election, but it is not winnable unless people are made aware of the election and the stakes. So this is one of those where the job is to go out and tell people, because people are like, most people don't pay close attention to the election calendar like this. And Wisconsin has so many elections. They're just always having elections. So making people aware. So this is actually, I'm just going to finish my little pitch because, going to Wisconsin and knocking on some doors or being on the phone banks, which we're running every Wednesday night. We have one tonight and every Wednesday, Wisconsin Wednesdays. Is people, we're calling and talking to Democrats who need to get out to vote, and we get them to come vote, and we will win. We get people to understand that Elon Musk is bankrolling the opposition, and they understand how important it is. So, and the really important thing is that these judge elections are nonpartisan. So there is no D or R next to these candidates' names. You have to know which one is which. And so it's an educational opportunity. And so it's a great thing to do. And if you want to sign up, go to indivisiblechicago.com and find our list. We're every weekend, we're every Saturday in Wisconsin. I know also the Operation Swing State folk, our colleagues in this effort in the Chicago area are also sending people up over these next weekends. So it's a great opportunity, and you want to feel good about doing something, and you want to put your stake in the ground against Elon Musk, come to Wisconsin with us or get on a phone bank. There is a progressive candidate and a regressive candidate, and we've got to elect the progressive.
No, I'm sympathetic to that side of things. And so right now, if people, what you're doing in Wisconsin is knocking on doors, and there are phone banks. And are there any other, you talked about Michigan and Wisconsin, that Illinois can play an impact on both of those states in elections. I'm wondering a little bit about our other neighbors. Iowa, I don't know, is there any hope for things changing in Iowa? Is there any hope for Andy Beshear in Kentucky spreading his vibe throughout the rest of people there? And what about Missouri, which used to have some Democrats in office? I don't know where it's all at now. Those are all states I used to really like, but I'm not as happy with them these days. Is there any visible activity there?
I'm not going to tell you there is no hope for anywhere, and I will say that who can predict the future? And there's a lot of entrenched opinion. However, you just named a whole bunch of farm states, and farmers are reeling from what's going on right now. They are in big trouble. They are in big trouble because they won't be able to sell their crops through USAID to other countries. They are in big trouble because a whole bunch of grants and monies that they had counted upon have been frozen. We're seeing warnings that, farms are going to go out of business. And none of those folks signed up for this, right? So I can't tell you what kind of organizing is going on in those states specifically, because I don't know. But there's an enormous opportunity to at least, mobilize some folks to fight back who are going to be, dramatically affected. And we haven't even started talking about Medicaid cuts and the people who are dependent on that for their kids, for the, for nursing home residents, et cetera.
Well, how far do you think the Trump administration will go on all these issues? Maybe take a few of them and talk about what they mean and what how people might interpret them, and there might be some resistance to them. We've got not only U.S. aid, we've got a lot of places and a lot of issues we have to deal with these days.
It's a fire hose of issues, and so I'm not going to pretend to be the policy expert on all of them. I'm gonna take a narrower view, which is they are bent on dismantling everything, and they are bent on dismantling everything in order to give control to unelected billionaires and oligarchs. And of course, as we know, not just control, but they don't want them to have to pay for anything. So, they want to give tax breaks. So they there's a lot of different theys going on here, right? There's the people behind Project 2025. There's Elon Musk and Donald Trump. There's the MAGA folks in Congress. They have their different priorities, but at the top, they don't care about any of these things, right? They want to dismantle government in order to dismantle government. And so
probably into privatize too.
And to privatize, that's part of the giving control to the, to the moneyed, and the corporations and the billionaires. As someone, as one of the people I listened to, Anat Shankar-Osorio, said the other day, it is government of the bullies for the billionaires. And so how far they will go, the answer is they will go as far as they can, right? Because they don't particularly have any limits on this. So the only limits are going to be the ones that they are forced to accept. It's my short answer. I think it cuts across the board on all of them, right?
You talked earlier about we and how we have to do it. And I'm wondering how we do that, and what your sense is around hope from within members of Congress and the Senate, like Chris Murphy and Bernie Sanders. So we have to work on a lot of fronts. But your thoughts on those people, and even Hakeem Jeffries and the we of Indivisible?
Yeah, so we do have to work on a lot of fronts, right? And there's, just to back up just a touch, there's three fronts going on right now. There's the court front, right? That's the one that's going to have to go on its own without most of us. The lawyers are extremely busy. They're not getting much sleep. That's one. The second is our elected officials, and the third is us. Us being the people. Right, everybody affected by all of these, and the second two are interrelated, but they are also distinct. And so, yes, we absolutely need our elected officials to be fighting back with every possible tool they have. And they have some tools. They don't have all the tools we want, and we're going to have to keep pushing them to use those tools, because our elected officials, just to be honest, they never have been and aren't elected because they are rabble rousers or they are organizers. So the organizers out here, all of us, have to help them understand what we need and what we want and what we expect them to do, and also to tell them when they do it, we have their back. So yeah, people like Bernie Sanders and oh my gosh, Chris Murphy, a little brain freeze there. Chris Murphy
from my home state of Connecticut.
They're doing a bang up job. They're doing great. Then others too. We've got some Illinois representatives who are really doing amazing work. My own Congresswoman Delia Ramirez is one of those stand-up people. We have to push them, and we have to tell them we have their backs, right? But they also, I know we're probably going to run out of time, so I want to say this, that we all need to understand that it's also up to us to demonstrate on an ongoing basis to our elected representatives, but also to everybody else that this resistance is real. I am wearing this button because not just to advertise Indivisible Chicago, indivisiblechicago.com, but because I've been wearing this on my coat for the last couple of weeks since that rally in Federal Plaza, and I go to the grocery store, I go everywhere. People stop and talk to me. They say, "Oh my gosh, this is so terrible. What can I do?" And I tell them things that I can do. But, what will stop this and what will get people who aren't engaged is seeing that there are people engaged who are willing to fight. If they don't see that, then people don't have the courage or the energy to get involved. So yes, we need to push our elected officials, but we have to find ways to demonstrate here in Chicago, in the red states, but also, I mean, in the blue states, but also in the red states, that people are resisting what's going on. And that's what's going to get our elected officials moving as well. So I'm advocating for as much direct action as possible. If you want to find out what we're doing here in Chicago, that daily action that you get, you can sign up for that and get on our mailing list. We don't bug you too much, but we let you know what's going on.
Any sense of if the courts rule in favor of some things on the left side of the agenda, do you think that Trump is going to follow that, or are we going to see a breakdown of response to the law?
We don't know, right?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. I think, I hope we get to find out because we need the courts to stand up, right? So I hope we get to find out. And if they don't, I think that tells us something about what we have to do to organize to make our voices heard.
Thanks so much for coming on live from the Heartland, and I hope we have you back because there's a lot going on and we're going to share as much as we can.